Hi guys, welcome to Apache Cordova start to finish. Let's grab the clicker. Apache Cordova start to finish. So my name's Amji Qureshi. To give you a little background info about myself. I've been working in IT for a little while now. It's been 98, seems a long time ago. I had a very different haircut at the time. Started on some classic ASP stuff, general SQL. Most of my stuff that you can see there is all kind of web developer based. So moved on from straight web development onto Azure and then moved on to Cordova. I've been leading projects of various sizes over the years, kind of small, medium and large, and don't do as much coding as I used to do a few years ago, which is kind of sad but kind of good at the same time. I work for a company called Provoke Solutions. We're based down in Welly, that's our main office, but we've also got places in Seattle and Auckland. And you can see there we're kind of design-led a little bit more than kind of technology-led, which is kind of good. Kind of think a little bit more about the user rather than around about what can we actually deliver, what do they want, rather than what we can actually make. Cool, so what will I be talking about today? So I'll cover a little bit about Cordova. I'm hoping you guys know a little bit about it already. Just give you a quick overview. I'll talk about the scenario for my demo, then I'll actually build an app, and then I'll talk about some of the things that make life a bit easier as you're kind of building your apps if you're going to be doing that down the line. And a lot of these learnings that I've got when we created the New Zealand Post app over the last year or so. And then I'll do some comparisons between web development versus Cordova development, and as long as we've got time, some Q&A. So Cordova. Probably the easiest thing to think about when you actually think about what it is think about it as a website on your phone. It'll serve up pages, it'll let you view these pages, you'll interact with it kind of like you would do a web page. There are some caveats, it's not, you haven't got all the things like IIS has got, that kind of stuff, but you have got a fair few of them. Works really well with single page applications, so anyone who's kind of played with one of them, it's effectively doing the same thing but on your phone. And the big plus here is the fact it's cross-platform. So you build it once and you can deploy it to whatever platforms, in my case primarily Android and iOS. It's definitely not native, you've got to kind of accept that. It's not something that you can look at and go, yeah, this is native, I'm going to get all my native features. However, it depends on the user. And this is something that I found. I could give it to another developer and they'll be like, hold on, this isn't native, I'm not really kind of comfy with that. Show it to the missus and she'd be like, yeah, it works, sweet, I'm happy. So it kind of depends on who you're talking about, and everyone's got their own little views on it, so whether that's a big deal or not. However, to do these native interactions like your camera, your GPS, that kind of stuff, you have to use a plugin. And plugins are readily available and there's lots of them around. I'll cover a little bit about that later. And they all work pretty well. You've got to pick and choose how you do it, but they all do most of the things that you need to do. Now, setup for iOS is a little bit more complicated, and to be honest, it's actually more to do with iOS and Apple rather than Cordova. You've got to jump through Apple hoops and download this and put this publishing profile left, right, and center. So no matter what you do, where you go, it's always going to have to be dealt with. So it's not really Cordova's issue, if that makes sense. So pros and cons. Cross-platform development, number one thing, it saves a shed load of time. And you'll see in the demo that I've done, I did most of my work on Android and then I'll deploy it to iOS. It's got similarities to web development, which is good. There's a lot more web developers out there when you actually think about it. The movement from web development to Cordova is going to be easier than, say, something like web development to Xcode or the Android equivalent, whose name I've forgotten. It's open source and it has got a large community. If you haven't got that large community, you haven't got the ability to turn around and go, right, we need changes, things need to move. And because it's got that large community, things move quickly, which is good. There's always new phones coming out, there's always new platform, new version of Android, new version of iOS, some patch breaks this, does that, and if you haven't got that large community, it doesn't really work as well. Cons is cross-platform development, but not everything is the same. It'd be great if you could go straight from iOS onto Android and work 100%, but there's the oddities that you've got to kind of deal with. And you do need these plugins for native actions, which is good and bad at the same time. If you pick a good plugin, everything's great. It's got a community of people supporting it, works really well. On the flip side, if you pick a plugin that's got like, you know, one person developing it, he goes on holiday, new version of the platform comes out and everyone's kind of scuppered. You can't really do much about it. And build times. Build times are quite slow compared to, say, web development. You have to do a build, then you have to deploy. Each of these things take a little bit of time. Cool, so let's build an app. So, who likes coffee? Quick show of hands. Yeah, just a few of you. How many of these people are actually developers, by the way? Yeah, good. So what I'm kind of thinking, so this is like my normal thing. I'll be getting off the bus in the morning and I'll be like, it's work. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. We're stumbling along and I'll be like, right, I want to get my coffee. So you walk into the coffee shop, but there's a queue and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of late for work. I just want my coffee here. I just want to get there. So the idea behind this is that as I get off the bus, I can hit a few buttons, place the coffee order. By the time I got to the coffee shop, it should be waiting there for me. Three main bits here. So I've got three screens. I've got a map view, which is going to be like, hey, this is where I am currently. These are the coffee shops in your area. I'm going to make the actual order, place it, and then just have a confirmation effectively saying, yeah, this is your order. Can't cover everything. To make this really work, you have to have something at the coffee shop that actually, you know, takes your order and whoever's making the barista or whatever needs to actually make it. That's kind of, we're not going to deal with that today. I'm not going to show you any of the APIs. That's kind of, it's all done in Web API, but it's not really what the presentation is about. I would have loved to do authentication with Facebook, or probably Facebook out of all of them, but that was kind of, it just would have taken too long to show all of that on top of everything. If I was going to do it, it'd be Azure, it'd probably be Azure B2C or straight Facebook plugin, depending on kind of how I want to roll it. And I'll show you code as I'm going along. I haven't got amazing logging in there. This is definitely a, you know, presentation bit of code. It's not like something I'd go to market with. Cool. So I'll just jump over and actually have to log in here because I've timed out. And what was that? There you go. I'm just going to sit down for a little while because I've got a bad back. Cool. So this is Visual Studio. I'm sure a few of you have seen it before. And all I've done really here is I've gone new project and chosen this like JavaScript template for Ionic side menu. And you know, as you can see, it's actually quite standard stuff here. It's Ionic 1.3 or 4 or something. Ionic 2 has just kind of come out, so I haven't fully played with that. I'm not actually going to do new right now, and the main reason for doing that is that as soon as you actually create that, you have to download a whole load of node packet managers, and that just takes a bit of time, and from demo purposes, it's not really going to work. So I'll just kick that off, and I'll just put the phone screen up there as well. Now, going back to build times, some of the build times are kind of slow. It can take a little bit of time kind of getting things all sorted. I've kind of tried to pre-do some of this, so I've actually already built this solution, so it will be a little bit quicker. If you add a new plugin, it will slow down a little bit. But even now you can see it's, you know, it says that was 8.4 seconds, it kind of feels a bit longer to me. And then that's just the build, and then you've got the deploy. So it's kind of one of them things you have to kind of take into consideration. You are going to be doing these build things, and they are going to take a little bit of time. You can see there, we've got a nice standard splash page. And here's your menu system. You know, you've got a menu there. You can go to different screens. Obviously, there's not a lot going on here. Go back to playlist, and then you can go in an extra step. So it's all kind of pretty simple there. And if I just show you some code, hopefully you guys can see this. I'm just trying to work out. Yep, hopefully that's not too bad. So yeah, as you see here, it's pretty good. Ionic gives you these kind of events or like platform ready. Just means that everything's all loaded now. I can set up a few things, and this is just standard stuff that came with the demo. With the template. If you're on iOS, then use this plugin for the keyboard. Add some styling to the status header, and then here you've got like your routing or your routing, depending on what part of the world you're from, and yes, this is all Angular UI routing. which is a nice word, anyway. So that's all good. So it's all pretty standard, no real dramas there. And then you go over to the controller. Now the controller's, it's doing a pretty simple thing here. You're just saying, hey, load me a modal from a template. And again, Ionic's giving you all these little things for free. It just makes things a little bit easier for you. You can show and hide modals, say loading screens is a classic thing, that kind of stuff. And then I'll just highlight this because I'll cover this a little bit later. But effectively what this is doing is just setting up a little bit of data here, and that's all good. So while I'm doing the demo, rather than actually writing code, what I'm actually going to do is just copy over code. So just bear with me here. And just paste all that stuff in there. And if I jump back there, you can see immediately these two files have actually just gone empty. So I've actually moved all that code. And what I've done is I've actually used TypeScript. Now, in my mind, if you're going to have a web app like Cordova based, it's all JavaScript. You do kind of need TypeScript to make it a little bit more solid. JavaScript, you can do anything. You can have a variable that starts off as an int, ends up as a string, and then goes to a function, then goes back to an int. It's kind of a bit crazy, and it becomes quite hard to debug and figure out what's going on. TypeScript just gives you a little bit of layer over that and lets you do some things that are a little bit close to, say, C# or whatever, and that kind of works quite well. And it also gives you this stuff here. It's like, hey, there's an error here. Like, you can't even build. Like, this shouldn't really be deployed. And in this case, it's saying, hey, I don't know what the hell Angular is. I don't know what Ionic is. And what's happening here is, even though these are part of the project and it's all there, the code's there, TypeScript doesn't know anything about it. So what you can do is you can use a thing called typing. So I'll just do a search here for Ionic. And that all goes off to the interweb and finds that. So that's the one we actually want there. That's the Ionic that we're interested in. So if I just find the correct one there. So if I do that, that's actually just going to go away, find my typings, download it, and then add it. So that's all good. So if you look here, and you see now there's a folder in here called Globals, and you've got Ionic, and that's got all the different functions that Ionic gives you. So it's got stuff about device, is it a different platform, blah, blah, blah. All just stuff like that, which is all kind of handy. And part of that also means that you get IntelliSense, which is really good. So what I'll do is I'll just add all my typings I'm going to need for this demo. I'll kick that off. And you can see there's just been slowly being added there, which is good. It's not perfect. There's a couple of plugins that I'm using, Diagnostic and Hockey App, and they don't have any typers. I couldn't find any, so I've had to create my own. It's all pretty straightforward. If you look at the actual documentation for these things, quite often they actually just give you all that, and it's just kind of almost a cut and paste kind of from there. Try and keep, if you are going to do that, I kind of recommend that you try and make it as strongly typed as possible. Use your booleans. If you can't do it, then you've always got the option to fall back to any, which is just kind of like an easy way out sort of thing. Cool. So one of the other things, this is a very important file for Cordova. You've got like a config XML, and it's exactly what it sounds like, all your config for everything to do with this. So we'll just rename this to be Perky Ignite, if I can spell. Save that, and it's just got like standard stuff. So you've got an internal name, and that comes into play when you're doing your deployments to the different stores. And then you've got this, which is, hey, what version of Cordova am I actually going to use here? Now this gets upgraded quite often, so it's kind of good to keep this under control. It's one thing, again, like I said, phones are always coming out, new phones are coming out, new versions of the operating system are coming out. So you will be doing upgrades as you go along, so it's something to be kind of phase into what you're thinking. Now plugins, so Visual Studio comes with some recommendations for plugins that cover a lot of scenarios, and they're all pretty good, and I think they've put in the ones that they're comfortable with, that have got that community, and they will work, and they will get updated over the years. And if it doesn't fit in, if you're one of them that isn't quite there, you can just go grab it based on the plugin ID or straight from Git. And over here, you just got your installed ones. It's all good. And then these things are any kind of settings that are specific to the three major platforms. Now that's all well and good, but occasionally you need to actually go a little bit further, and you need to actually edit the XML file. So, and it is just an XML file, and it's got a load of stuff there. So what I'll do is I'll just jump in here, and grab all that. And yeah, all I'm trying to do here is get the actual splash page. So rather than using that standard Apache one that you saw earlier, I'm going to actually have my own based on the Perky app. And so show that, have a few settings based on the background color. And again, this is Android. You've got like based on density, so you've got high density, low, medium, extra high, and then landscape, portrait. So different images that you can use for your splash page. iOS is pretty much the same thing. It's just got like based on widths because they've got a little bit more control over their phones, and Windows sits somewhere in the middle. And in the same manner, you've got the actual icon. Kind of works exactly the same way, and iOS is a bit more specific, whereas Android, it can just handle that. So I've just given it one for now. Just that expands and contracts as needed. If you want to, you can actually go further. Cool. So I'll just kick that off. I'm not expecting a lot of change here. All I've really done is add a splash screen and a icon. Hopefully, if I'm quick enough, I can just go add that to homepage. There you go. And hopefully you'll see that flicker onto a new icon, and then we'll see a splash page. What's going on? Let's grab this. Cool. So there you go. So that's just a brand new little icon and splash page there. So the move to TypeScript, so there's one other little gotcha that I kind of want to point out. So if I just look at the playlists and the controller for that playlist, which is... And so you can see the code here. It's kind of a little bit close to C#, so there's a little bit more you're declaring your variables. Now this is a little trick that we've had to put in. So you kind of say, hey, I'm going to have a scope, and I'm going to call it control or controller, and I'm going to assign that to the current class. And what that means is when you're on the actual template, you've actually got to use that for your variables. Whereas if you were using straight Angular, you could just use straight direction into the actual property. So it's a little bit of a cheat. It's not perfect. It would be nice if I could get rid of it, but I never actually found a way to get around that. But it works quite well. And then if you look at this now, this bit of code here is the old one. And you know, it works, it's all good, but down here we've got it strongly typed. And it's just that little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more control over things again, which I kind of like. Cool, so, all right, now just move on to the second part, which is going to be the actual home page. So yeah, so the idea of the home page here is that this is your map screen. You're logged in, you're kind of there, and as soon as you see where you are currently, and then based on that, you'll see a coffee shop, and then you can kind of make your order. So I'll just kick that off, and while that's going, I'll run you through some code. So again, strongly typed makes life a lot easier. You've got all these Ionic things like a loading service, they're all really nice. And then you've got this on view enter. Now, probably doing a few too many things on view enter. That's not loading the view, it's actually entering the view. So there is another event for load and unload, as well as enter and exit. So kind of use them as you need. You can see the code is pretty straightforward. You're just kind of checking for a person, and then you're getting your location and making a request for it. And that's the debug starting there. So the first thing is it's just saying, hey, are you actually logged in? So I'll just go in, do that. Oh. And so this bit here, so this is kind of new to, say, Android 6, and iOS has been doing a little bit longer. So rather than when you download your app and you say, hey, these are all the permissions you need, and you kind of generally just breeze through them, like, yeah, whatever. Now it's actually changed to when your app is actually using these things, you've got to just go and ask for them, just to confirm with the user that you haven't just accidentally done something. Think of that scenario where you've got an app, and then it's all it's meant to do is a game, and then suddenly it's got all your contact history, and you're like, oh, why are you doing that? It's a bit dodgy. So it's kind of help with that. So I'll just allow that, and then I'll get my location and let that warm itself up. And you can see there, just scroll that up there, there's only one coffee shop in the area. There's not a lot going on around here at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I just grab the phone. And this is just like a handy little tool. There's plenty of these around. What you can do is just call fake GPS or fake location. I'm just going to redirect myself into Wellington, right where I'll get off on the bus, and jump back onto here, do a refresh, and then all of a sudden, there I am. There's a few extra coffee shops around in that area, which is kind of handy. And that's just like a handy tool, really. And apparently people have used that little trick and done some crazy stuff with Pokemon Go, but I don't really play it, so I'm sure there's some good hacks you can do. Okay, so just going in the code here. So this one's here, the main one, sort out location and request. And what I'm doing is I'm making that authorization, just checking if I've got location, what state it's in. Let's scroll over a bit. You've got three main scenarios here. Hasn't been requested. You haven't been requested, or if it has been requested, you just said, yeah, I'm not going to do it for now, ask me again later. And if you're going to do that, go make the request again, and then then get the location. If it's all granted and you're granted in use, which is an iOS thing, then just go get the location. And if for whatever reason you've completely denied it and you don't want anything to do with it, just show me a link going off to the settings effectively. So I'll just jump into here. And again, it's all pretty good here, like we're using Ionic loading thing, just saying, hey, I'm getting a location, just to let the user know that something's going on. Getting that current position, and once you've done that, I'm going to go set up my Google Map. And then when you get here, I mean, Google Map API is quite well documented, which is really good, but just having it strongly typed is just so much easier. Just like, things like this, you can go, hey, what are the different options I've got here? And they're all there. And it's all just really nice and easy. It's kind of a little bit close to what C# is, so it's kind of like what we're really going for there. And then once the actual map's loaded and it's all idle, then I'm going to go off and actually do my get my current position and the coffee shops. Now this is where one of the things that I really like about TypeScript, things like this. So I've created a service to go get me all the shops, all the coffee shops. And what I've done is I've actually said, right, this is a shop service, and I'm going to inherit from base service. And so all my hard work's really done here, and you can see this one's actually quite straightforward. There's not a lot going on. So I'll just jump in there. And yeah, you can see just kind of standard functions here, like build some query string with some ready to use, and these are all private, which means that nobody's really going to be accessing. It's kind of a little bit of a weird one there because it is private, but at the end of the day, the JavaScript's going to be published, and so anyone can actually call it. So it's not totally private. It's not as if they can never see it, but from the coding point of view and the compiler's point of view, it is private, so you won't be able to call it unless you're actually inside the class. And then we've got things like make the actual request, and then for the get, what I've done here is I've basically made it like very multiple optional parameters here to handle all the different things, like if you've got an ID, if you're doing a different action, and then if you want to pass in some extra stuff on the end. So I'll just jump back a little bit there. And you can see here the get is just literally saying, hey, go do the base class get with like standard parameters. Whereas the get nearest is actually calling the same thing, but I'm actually just saying, hey, do this particular action. And again, it's just kind of nicer just having that ability to do these kind of things. Cool, so what's next? All right, so move on to the third part. Now, I'll just kick that off. Now, the third part, and this is where you're actually making the order and then taken onto the confirmation page. Now, going back to the scenario that I was actually trying to say at the start of it, you were getting off the bus, you want to order your coffee, your brain's not functioning, you're not really sure what's going on. You just want to do this thing real quick. So from my mind, I've tried to make this as quick and as simple as possible. So I'll just reel through this once it's loaded. Cool, so it loads up. Need to log in, which we've got to do. Just log in there. And then I go, right, I'm going to go to gasoline. They're the ones that play techno in the morning. And there you go. So I'm on this page, and I'm going to go, right, just want a long black, one of those, place my order, done. And I'm straight there. And what I was trying to get out of there is this is easy. It's like I shouldn't really have to think about this. That's kind of what I was aiming for here. So I'll just go a little bit slower on that one, on the next one. And so what I've got there is I've got like it's pretty much a radio list based on buttons. So you're flicking between the two, very clear about what's going on. And again, this comes back to usability side of things. It's like, I just want to know what's going on. I don't want to have to complicate things. I don't want to have to think, do I have to press this? Do I have to press that? It's just all there. One of the other options I had, and now down here, and this is Ionic. This is one of the things that Ionic gives you, pretty much as part of its framework, is the ability to have these as a radio list. And again, that all works. There's nothing wrong with that. Just from my scenario, this was like, hey, one thing to see the options, and then another click to actually choose them. And I just looked at that and went, that's not really what I'm trying to do here. And then, say if I add that now, and then this little confirmation little thing, again, that's all Ionic, and it's all easily configurable, easily changeable. I can change the colors like without any kind of drama through CSS. It's all just kind of really nice and easy. Cool. And then, so actually I'll just make an order there and go off to here. So you see this one now, this is again, it's Google Maps, it's a static image saying, here's my 2 points on there, here's my coffee shop, that's where I'm currently. Now I could have easily put some direction stuff in here and use the API and sorted all that, but then at the end of the day, why do that when you've actually got an app that does that for you? So again, this is a different mindset of thinking. It's like, we've got an app, there's no point trying to reinvent the wheel, use the app that is going to be better at it anyway. And it's also what the user is expecting. They're using this app, this is a default one, so if they're using that, then you might as well let them do what they want. And if they choose to change it, then you're letting them follow that as well. Oh, let's just jump back there. Cool, so I'll just jump into some code on the back of that. So if I go into the, wrong one, yeah, so in here. And so it's got a bunch of stuff, again, it's all pretty straightforward. And jump to place order, which is here. So this is, this is me actually making the order once I've pressed that button. I've got some pretty loose validation here, I probably would, if it was production ready, I'd probably do it slightly different. But for here, I'm just saying, hey, go put a loading page on there, nice and easy. And then I've got my coffee order service. And again, this is based on that same class, the extending the base service. So that's kind of a bit of sharedness going on there. And then I want to talk about this thing, which is local storage. So whenever now that I've made my order and it's all worked, and it's all passed, there's no errors, I'm actually now going to just store it in local storage. So as someone who's developing for phone apps, you can easily just throw everything into an API and just make these API calls whenever you need it, using up people's data left, right, and center. And it works, and no one's really going to complain about it until they look at their bill and go, hold on, why have I gone through so much megs? So you've got to think about it a little bit different. If you don't need to make those API calls, you don't need to return all that data, then don't do it. Maybe the API shouldn't return the whole data that you've just uploaded. Maybe it only needs an ID, that kind of stuff. And then also, what you can do here is I'm just going to store these actually on the phone. So in this case, I'm just saying, hey, load them into memory if needed. So go to my local storage, get that item, and convert it, strongly types, into an array of coffee orders. And if for whatever reason there's nothing in there, then just give me an empty array so I can actually use it. Then add the order that I'm actually just made, put that into memory. And because you're using local storage, you want to actually think about, hey, is this an infinite thing here? Have I got as much storage as I need? There's no DBA is going to phone you up in like 6 months' time and go, hey, you guys really need to think about archiving this data. It's like, no, you actually think about that now. So whenever you're doing that, whenever I add something to it, all I'm basically doing is saying, hey, go get me everything between that is like 30 days old and splice it away and get rid of it. We don't really need it. Trying to leave in 2 there just for the home page so you've actually got something appearing. So again, it's, that's all pretty good and it's pretty useful. Local storage is great. It is string based, so you kind of have to convert everything from like JSON or whatever into strings, and it works quite well. I don't have any real problems with it. And you can get various plugins that can go a little bit further if you want and have actual databases and stuff. The other option, rather than local storage, is session storage, which does exactly what it sounds like. Cool. So I'll just go back to the phone a second, and I don't know if you noticed, so I'll just go back to the home page. As you're making these orders, so everything kind of slides in from right to left, so kind of like movement effectively from one thing onto the next thing. So what I've done, and again this is another Ionic thing that just sort of comes in quite easily usable, is I can, actually I'll do this off the mouse because it's going to, you can see like I'm just swiping it that way, and that allows you to go back. And it's just a kind of nice feature, and you can see the animation kind of fits with it as well. And you know, you can change that from left to right or right to left, it doesn't really matter, it's kind of whatever you fancy. And if you really want to, you can do things like fade in and fade out, or up and down, that kind of stuff. So that all kind of works. Cool. All right, so just check the times. I'm doing quite well there. So one of the things that you can do, and this again comes down to what you actually want to do with your work. So I'll touch on Hockey app in a little while. And it's like a recently bought Microsoft product, and you can actually feed that into your app. You can do deployments of it, and it's really, really useful for that. But one of the other things you can do is, say, give feedback. So say you're doing this deployment, you're putting it out to your UAT users, you deploy that away, but you want to get their feedback, and you can just do this, and it just gives you that straight away. It's just kind of easily done. You just type in whatever, chuck in your email, and you know that saves it away, and everyone's, you know, then you get that feedback back. Oh, just put something there, and that all works, and it's quite nice and quite straightforward and easy. And if you want to add attachments and stuff, then that all works really, really well. It's also got generate crash reports. Now, this is a little bit less useful, I think, for Cordova. Like if I click on that, I'll just crash the app. It's like, there you go. And this is like a full-on, the app's completely crashed. What we find with Cordova and Ionic stuff is that it's more likely you're going to be getting JavaScript errors rather than these kind of errors. So it's not as useful. But next time you go in, if you ever do get one of them, it's like, hey, do you want to actually send a report? So I'll just leave that alone for now.
What's the advantage of Hockey app over something like Ionic View?
Over what, sorry?
Ionic View, which is like another.
So we kind of found that if you use Hockey app, it's actually deploying to devices. And so most people have got smartphones now. They're either iOS or Android for the most part. And you can actually deploy to a device, so it's actually exactly what it is. And you know, the Ionic View thing is good, and we kind of found it was okay, but just having it on someone's phone just gives them a real experience of what it's actually going to be, and that's the thing that we found really handy. And you know, I'll talk a little bit about you know, your stakeholders, and they like seeing it how it's going to be, and not all of them are as savvy as you'd imagine. Cool. So one of the strong portions of Cordova is this merges folder. Now hopefully you can see that. I've got like a magic zoom tool, and it's basically just like you just put anything in here, and what it does is just before you do your build on, say, Android, it will take these files and overwrite whatever the main project is with those ones. And it's kind of their way of saying if you want to customize something for Android or iOS, that's the way you do it. We didn't actually end up using that a lot. What we found was that from a JavaScript point at least, we pretty much use if statements. Because we've got this TypeScript thing, and all it does at the end of it is just outputs one big JavaScript file. That doesn't really work because you've got to replace the whole file. So that wasn't really, you know, working for us. And for CSS, so if I just look at that, the way we got around that, and this is something that I quite liked, was in a similar way to Modernizer, if anyone's used that, it adds this kind of stuff to the body. So, hey, this is a platform, it's iOS or platform Android or platform Windows. And based on that, you can then say, hey, is it iOS? Yep. Then I can just change the CSS accordingly and overwrite it. And it even goes a little bit further. It's even like iOS 9 or iOS 10 and that kind of stuff. So you get that little bit extra with it. And as you see here, most of the stuff is just kind of pretty minor, really. Cool. So Cool, we'll just jump back to Prezzo now, which was that one.
Is there some equivalent to that using SAS?
Yeah.
Provide that for you?
Yeah, so Ionix definitely got like a link into SAS, and you can, it's like a gulp task, and effectively it pre-builds the CSS, and you can use that. I'm not using that in this example. From work perspective, we actually use less more than we use SAS, and so we ended up not using some of those features. But yeah, it does work, and it's meant to be really, really useful. Cool. So I'll just stand up again. So just to prove that this actually did work on iOS, I'll just show you this really short video, and it is an iOS device. It's got Perky on there. And from a deployment point of view, I did all my work on my Android phone because that's my phone. And then when I went to deploy it on iOS, deployed it, and actually most of it worked within like the first minute. And the map view right at the start was the only thing that actually caused an issue, and that took me about an hour to actually sort out. So from a, what is Cordova, what's its strength, it's that cross-platform development. And it literally took me an hour to go from one platform to the other platform. Bear in mind I had the build server all set up and stuff, so that's kind of part of it as well. Cool. So everyone have a moment, adjust your pillows, see how you go. Cool. Tools that were useful along the way. So while we were doing all this, you've got to use different things. Far and away, the best thing that we had was Visual Studio Debugger. Like I know a few people who use Cordova based on Apple products. And just when they saw the debugger, that was like, oh my God, this would make life so much easier. Just the ability to hover over variables, like why they're going, see how things are progressing, just makes life so much easier. Anyone who's worked with JavaScript a bit has probably used self equals this, that kind of stuff, and you have to use that a little bit as well just to get TypeScript working in some scenarios. So just kind of bear that in mind if you're doing that. Back to Hockey app now, we found this totally invaluable. When we started the project, we were doing releases on the phones, and that was just, on like 6 phones was taking like half an hour, maybe an hour, depending on how unlucky we were. When we moved to Hockey app, it was like you make these builds, you do that, you upload it to the website, and then that just feeds it down to all the devices. So from a tester's point of view, and the developer who has to get it to the tester, he's just got to put it onto Hockey app. The tester then can go download, 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 and wait for all of them to happen, rather than the tester waiting for each of these devices to be drip fed to him. It's been by far and away one of the biggest kind of movements and made life so much easier. It does also do crash reports, like I was saying earlier, but it doesn't fit that amazingly well with Cordova. It's kind of more designed, I think, for Xamarin, to be honest. It does that feedback thing, which is definitely useful, and I'd say you might want to have some sort of flag in there saying, hey, I'm on UAT, or I'm on like that kind of level, and going to production, probably don't want it, but it's up to you. Also can hook in straight into application insights, so if you want to use that, you can then hook that, which is actually quite useful. Things need to be, you need to play with that CSS. Now, you saw some of the build times there, it was actually kind of painful. And the way to get around that is to use these 2 tools here. So plug in your Android phone, hook it up to Chrome, and you can actually see the screen as it's changing. That you see that's an early view of like the app as I was kind of CSSing it, making it actually look decent. And the Google one's definitely, the Chrome one's definitely a lot better than the Safari one, but Safari one's still really useful. You have to be plugged into the actual OS X machine. So when you have this build server, I do recommend having it near your developers, and then that way they can actually just use it and have a pretty long cable as well, helps. Xamarin Test Cloud, and I think that was mentioned on the keynote. You can use it is, as the name says, it is all about Xamarin, but you can actually use it for Cordova. There's a scripting language called Calabash that hooks into it. Now, this isn't something that I've used, but I do really want to get into this, and it's definitely something we're pushing at the moment. And you're going to have bugs, everyone knows that. It's just the way these things go. So definitely hook in some sort of bug tool. We've got Bugsnag and weirdly named Atatus, I think. And they both do the same job, and they both have their pros and cons, but they're both good. Analytics, so App Insights or Google Analytics, they both do a good job. Amazing amount of questions we got, like one of the ones, so the New Zealand Post app, the classic one was like, hey, how many of these users are logged in? Amazingly, you don't have to actually log into the phone app, New Zealand Post app. How many are logged in, how many aren't? And there was no analytics for it, so we had to add that. But you get all of these questions, so I totally recommend putting as much analytics in as you can, because these questions will come eventually from someone. So like I said, New Zealand Post app was where we've got a lot of these learnings and we've got the experience over the last year or so. So there's a little bit of background there. We inherited the app from another company. Things hadn't really changed too much over the last few years. The aim, and this was something that we agreed with Post, was to do regular updates over the next, ongoing period of time, with new functionality coming kind of regular. Not every week, but more like every month, maybe 2 months, just to go in with what they're planning over the next few years. So the first thing we did is ported the whole thing to Visual Studio, got it from Apple-based stuff onto Visual Studio. And we kind of went, well, we've got old stuff there, we want to kind of do new stuff here. So we ended up actually running 2 single-page apps next to each other. One was kind of Backbone 1.0, which even to move that to one of the higher versions was actually quite a big move. And then what we actually really wanted to do, and that's what we know, is Angular. So we were like, okay, well, we want to do that. And then we ummed about it, and we ended up saying, right, we're just going to have 2 apps and run them side by side. So the first thing we did was we updated the tracking section. So when you're tracking your parcels, all that information got there. It wasn't complete. There was other things that we knew were coming, but we got it working to a point that was nice and usable. And then we did a locator section. Where's your local post shop or parcel selling place or that kind of thing. Things in progress at the moment. So we're currently doing new parcel control features. So you've probably seen the adverts on telly, which are slightly odd, but that's just my view. And so these things like authority to leave and redirect, them kind of things. So they're all being integrated now, and they'll be kind of released soon, if not already. And the next step, which is kind of part way through, is going to move everything off the old app into the new app. And so that'll have a little bit of a spruce just as we're doing that. So what things did we learn along the way? Definitely use real devices. So at certain points in time, we were using emulators and the such like. And real devices were better. They just work better. They were more realistic. You end up, the emulators work, but then suddenly you put them on a real device and something doesn't work. So you kind of need to do that anyway. So you're better off just doing that from the start. Beg, borrow, and steal old devices. They're ridiculously hard to come by. You can't go into a shop and buy old phones. It's just impossible. So you have to kind of borrow these things, which again leads back to that Xamarin Test Cloud, because they've got them there, so that can actually be quite useful. In my opinion, you should get a Apple build server and put it right near your developers. It just makes life a bit easier. There are these alternatives where they're like VM-based and cloud-based and all that. Don't seem to work. You can have a VM on your machine, which you can, in theory, put your USB through to it, in theory, but an actual physical device just works. Monitor your reviews. So we were quite depressingly, one of our first reviews was a 1-star on Apple, which was quite depressing. But it actually told us, they were like, hey, we can't paste in our tracking codes. And we were like, really? And then went and tried it on Apple, and you actually couldn't. It was like, how do we miss that? Worked on Android, which is what we tested on, but we didn't test it on the iOS, which is a bit of a mistake. However, we were monitoring them. We got a release out pretty quick, got a fix in, got a release out. And so we responded to it. So it was quite good. It's kind of one of the only ways that they can actually give feedback, really. I mentioned it before, analytics. People ask all sorts of questions, and they will ask all sorts of questions. So the more information you've got up front, the better. Try it on people that are not in the developer team, just to see how they feel. The people who are developing it kind of get too close. Even if it's another developer, it doesn't actually matter as long as they haven't seen it before. Everyone's got their own little ways of working. Everyone's got their own little things with their phone, how they like it. Everyone's different. Some people are going to like this, some people are going to like that, and you've got to make that decision. Stakeholders are very key on that front. They're paying the money at the end of the day. So again, going back to that hockey app, when we got that all set up and we could push these updates out, knowing that they're not perfect. It's like end of sprint. It's not completely done. It's not ready for release, but they could see it in action. And that made a really, really big difference. Before you do an actual release to stores or anything like that, do a full regression full regression test. Go through the whole app. You never know what you've broken. There's a lot of people working on it. It's definitely worth doing. And if you are going to deploy to iOS, add a little bit of time for review time. In our case, it took like 2 or 3 days max, but I've heard up to like some people like 8 or 9 days, you know, depending on time of the year and stuff. Cool. So Cordova apps and web development, you know, things are the same and different. Build times are probably the biggest one. You do get sidetracked. You will be going down one path, and then you'll do a build and you'll do a deploy, and then you'll have like a minute and a half, and suddenly you're checking stuff, and then you're like, oh, look at this, and then you're on YouTube and you're like, oh shit, what am I doing? So you've got to kind of like bear that in mind. You've got to have a little bit of like, I don't know, patience and a little bit of focus. Plan for extra devices. So what we found early on is we had like 4 devices, and when the tester needed to do his testing, he needed all them devices. So that was sweet. We moved on to emulators, but then that slowed down the build based on the stuff I was talking about earlier. So just in the end, we ended up getting more devices because it was just worth it. So just take that in mind. You know, think about these things, how you actually want to do that. Definitely can't hit refresh for CSS changes. That's real downside. But hey, those Google Chrome tools and Safari tools help a lot. And one thing we always thought about when we were doing this, when we were thinking about the phone and how people are using it, is like, you walk and use your phone. Everyone does it. You probably shouldn't do it. You're probably going to get run over one day, but we all do it nonetheless. And so you have to think about that. And people, you're not 100% focused on this thing. You know, you are kind of got side things going on here. That you need to be thinking about that. So it needs to be easy to use. And it was just a good way for us to think, hey, is this page usable? Is this screen usable as I'm walking along? And it was just something that we use quite well. People are ruthless. They download an app, and if they don't like it, it's gone. That's it. You know, it doesn't take them long to decide. So polish, making the app that little bit nicer is pretty much essential from my mind. You know, if you look at the post app, you've got some animations coming in, and that was all polished. You know, we didn't need to do that. It would have worked without it. But it's just nice, and so people were like, oh, okay. And it's not like, hey, this is a game changer or anything like that. It's just that nicer feeling that people get. But definitely allow for that polish time. Cool, so I'm coming to the end. So hopefully at the end of this, you kind of know how to create an actual Cordova app. It's not that difficult if you've got Visual Studio. You do need some setup stuff, but it's not too bad. You can see definitely some similarities between web and Cordova. You know some of the pros and cons. Like everything in IT, nothing's a silver bullet. This is a good product, but it doesn't do everything. So you've got to kind of play to its strengths and stay away from its weaknesses. Hopefully you love TypeScript because it's awesome. Anything JavaScript in my mind should be done in TypeScript. And hopefully you're going to go away and think about building a phone app. Cool. And, oh, sorry. And here's some links. I'm sure you can all copy them really quickly. And yeah, please give me some feedback. It's my first time presenting at Ignite. I'm keen to hear how good, bad, or ugly I was. Cheers.